Check the 40 show. Check the 40 shorty, yeah. Check the 40 shorty, yeah. Check the 40 shorty. Why you acting all gaudy? This ain't a pod, this a party.
We are back. Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy 40 Podcast. I'm John DeBari with my co-host, Mr. Matt Walker. Andrew Burke was supposed to be here, but he, again, is not. Today we're going to be breaking down the NFC West for fantasy purposes, completing our divisional breakdowns, take next week off, and start getting ready for redraft if there's an NFL season. Dun, dun, dun. Cue the ominous piano sound in the background. Walk, how are you?
So now I got to go find an ominous piano sound, or I'll just use yours because it was so awesome. And for our loyal listeners, you know, obviously everyone knows that Andrew Burke is now just a guest that appears on the Fantasy 40 from time to time. And of course, he made it a point to get on the NFC East so he could do his worst to defend the Dallas Cowboys.
Poor job.
Yeah, it's and to your point, you know, topical news that my Philadelphia Phillies and the Miami Marlins have made news recently that another 8 players tested positive for COVID when the Marlins got back home from their 3-game slate against the Phillies, canceled their game today, and then in reaction, the Phillies and Yankees canceled a game that they had scheduled for today, which I totally understand. Because imagine if you're the Yankees walking in to the visitors' locker room, had 12-plus people that were known to have contracted the coronavirus during their time in Philadelphia. It's some interesting times. That baseball seems a little in flux. Basketball seems like they're doing it the right way, but when you can put everyone in a bubble in Orlando and only Lou Williams is out there fucking it up for everyone, I guess, anything's possible. You can't do that with NFL rosters and baseball, you know, the requirements that they have as well. So interesting times, John. Interesting times.
Jeff Schwartz, I think, tweeted this morning that NFL teams typically travel with about 200 people. He said, so there's no way you could put each team in a bubble.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, where are you going to, I think Matt Kelly tried to surmise a solution, which was like 4 host cities in certain areas where everyone just stays there and they kind of self-bubble. Like, I guess they take out entire hotels and trap them as such, and then you just rotate and you literally play like a game like almost every day. Like there's a Monday game, Tuesday game, Wednesday game, Thursday, and then at a certain point, teams would have to switch because you can't just keep playing the same people over and over again if you're only 4 cities with 32 teams. So there would still be travel involved, but it'd be a lot more limited than other scenarios. That would be a logistical nightmare to try and figure that out. And to your point, with just the sheer volume of people that are involved in NFL planning and games, goodness, the numbers that are popping for baseball it's going to be like tenfold in the NFL.
Listen, I would walk into that. It was in Philadelphia, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would walk into that Phillies visitor locker room, lick every door handle, and share the used toothbrushes. I'm going in there fearless.
It's the way you live life, Jonathan. Yeah, almost as if you're looking for these things at this point. And we had a rather lengthy pre-call discussion on insurance and the like. So that does not surprise me at all. Yeah, since you like using your deductible up as quickly as possible, why not?
Sure.
Yeah, why not test the limits of the system at this point in time?
I have yet to use my insurance for pandemic coverage yet. Let's jump in with 2 feet.
It's just sitting there begging to be tapped into. So, as you said, we're on to the last division, and we're heading out west to the NFC West. Yeah, and then we're taking a much-needed week down. And then hopefully when we come back, we have a clearer picture as to if the NFL will be proceeding according to plan, because they've given every indication that this money train is barreling down the tracks. So even if the players weren't on board, Goodell was just feeding coal into that fire, picking up steam. They are playing football one way or the other. So interested to see how it turns out. But before all that, let's button up these divisional breakdowns with the NFC West.
Yeah, so we're going to jump in, according to the old alphabet, once again, with the Arizona Cardinals first.
John, I have to say, I'm very proud of you. There's a curveball in this division, and it's those 49ers. where it's, do you go numbers? Do you go letters? Do you change the numbers to letters? I thought all options were on the table, and you seamlessly picked the correct one, that the numbers are last. We lead off with the Cardinals in the C. So I'm very proud of you, but go on.
We're making great strides here. They did nothing in free agency in the offseason. Mid-year, they did bring in Kenyon Drake, some defensive players that I wrote down, but you get upset when I bring them up, so I'll just skip over them and go right to the draft. They attack defense. The only offensive player they brought in, 7th-round running back, Eno Benjamin, local product from Arizona State, so not much to discuss for their offseason.
No, other than DeAndre Hopkins, but from a relevant draft perspective, you are right. But these Cardinals are an exciting bunch. The Cliff Kingsbury experience went, I think, about as well as one. I know you're not a fan.
Went okay.
He's clearly, listen, he continued to pivot. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. They were more run heavy than I had assumed. I know they were extremely inefficient from a passing perspective, but getting Hopkins in and trading for Drake mid-season and bailing on past his prime David Johnson and whatever Benjamin may or may not be, but this is going to be an exciting offense, especially for fantasy purposes in 2020. So might as well dive right in feet first, and my breakout's going to be Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray was the quarterback 7 overall last year, but he was quarterback 12 as far as points per game with any quarterback that started 8 games last year. So from a points per game perspective, he was a low-end quarterback 1. I'm saying that he is going to play all 16 games and be a top 5 quarterback points per game in 2020. He has the wheels to do it. He has the weapons to do it. And that offense is still going to need to score points because although I think the defense made strides and Isaiah Simmons could probably cure a lot of ills, I still don't think they're a good defense. So they're going to be in quite a few shootouts, in my humble opinion. And Kyler Murray can produce in shootouts with his arms and his legs. So I'm super optimistic about Kyler Murray in 2020.
That was a very Burkean chalk pick. He would have been my pick, but he, like you mentioned, he finished 7th last year. So I was like, I think he kind of already broke out. By default, this is another team that had really no real breakout candidates. So I went with Kenyon Drake. He finished running back 17 last year, and that was pretty much all with his production when he got to Arizona. Once again, didn't do much when he was with the Dolphins in the first part of the year. So just by default, he's my guy. They did seem to use him well. They like him there. I don't think the presence of 7th-round rookie Eno Benjamin in a year with no offseason poses any threat to him at all. I do like Chase Daniel, but again, he's going to be their number 2. So unless Drake misses time, I don't think – not Chase Daniel.
Whoa.
Chase Edmonds.
All right.
Chase Edmonds. So to me, it's Drake. I think if he gets the work he saw last year with this team, he could be a running back 1, which is shocking to me and disgusting at the same time. So for me, it's Kenyon Drake.
I'm not going to lie. Burkean is something that I'm going to use.
Oh, that's our new verb.
From this point out. It was tremendous. So trying to use that effectively, you said that I was very Burkean in my Kyler Murray approach. Well, you picked running back 3 during the last 5 weeks of the NFL season as your breakout candidate. So I don't know that you really went in any better direction than I did. You just decided to pick a different guy who already broke out. But I digress. It was a nice kind of bait and switch move. It was like the cup game. You're like, maybe he's paying attention to the insult and not the statement thereafter. But either way, I do think Kenyon Drake should be talked about. We'll just talk about him in a different segment as far as I'm concerned. So let's move on to the bust. Who is your bust in this offense?
I'm actually going to do my bust and sleeper together because they tie in. My bust is Christian Kirk, who is currently being taken as wide receiver 37, I believe. And I am just, with Hopkins being there, I just don't see how Kirk can produce on this team. I think it's going to be all Fitz and it's going to be all Hopkins. Last year, Kirk had 108 targets, 68 receptions, 700 and change yardage, 3 scores. Fitzgerald had 109 targets, 75 receptions, 800 yards, 4 touchdowns. He was a wide receiver 35 last year. I think Hopkins comes in. He's going to get 150-ish targets, which puts Fitz probably right around the 100 mark again. I just don't think the targets are going to be there for Kirk. I think Kirk is the bust, and Fitz is my sleeper. He's currently wide receiver 91, going 218 overall. I mean, obviously in Dynasty, it's a young man's game, but give me him at that draft position. You're going to get another year of production out of him. And he hasn't really indicated this is the end of the road for him. And as long as he's on this team and has the role that he has, he's going to outproduce that ADP.
Very, very well tied together. My bust was also Christian Kirk. And I wasn't as expansive as you, as I said, but he saw 108 targets last year, which was one off the team lead by Larry Fitzgerald. And then I just wrote enter Nuke. Yep. And what do we expect here? Hopkins is going to get 150 targets. Anyone that is concerned about Hopkins in this offense, trade him to me. I'll gladly take him. Like, granted, he came from a very nice situation in Houston, but Houston turned him into a, underneath receiver for whatever reason last year, and it was painful to watch the targets that Hopkins was getting last year. As opposed to years prior. Well, he's going to get those deep looks again in this Kingsbury offense, playing on that outside with Kyler Murray throwing the ball. So very high on Nuke, and so someone's got to bust. And Christian Kirk was the wide receiver 47 last year, to your point, with those 108 targets. He's going to get less targets, so how are we expecting him to do significantly better? It's assuming touchdowns at this point in time. There's a newly established pecking order, and best case scenario, Christian Kirk is third in that order. And while there'll be a volume passing game, the running backs are going to catch the ball. There's going to be a fourth wide receiver out there in a lot of sets, whether it be Andy Isabella or Hakeem Butler or whoever else they trot out in 4 wide receiver sets. There'll be a fair amount to the tight ends here and there with Dan Arnold or Max Williams will probably eat more in a random game than we want them to. But Christian Kirk, the addition of DeAndre Hopkins at offense until Fitzgerald retires dings his value to me. So it's not only redraft. I think it hurts him dynasty-wise as well, because I agree with you. I don't know what Fitz's contract looks like, but he hasn't given it this is my last year. I'm trying to win a Super Bowl and retire. Entirely possible. So this could persist. So I'm with you with Christian Kirk. My sleeper was not Larry Fitzgerald because I just don't know the upside that he has. Granted, better than where you're saying he's being drafted, but still not someone I will ever be starting in any redraft league, and hopefully not in really any dynasty league either. So my sleeper is Chase Edmonds. Big Chase Edmonds fan. I know you like Chase Edmonds as well. We were so close to seeing the Chase Edmonds breakout last year when David Johnson finally got shelved, but then Edmonds himself got injured after a huge game against the New York Giants, and then they bring in Kenyon Drake, which was a smart trade on their behalf because they didn't give up a lot, and you see what they wanted to be as a run-based offense. And once Drake started hitting, you knew Kenyon Drake wasn't getting another opportunity, but he's still one injury away. And we see what this offense can mean from a production standpoint for the lead running back. And if Drake goes down, it's going to be Chase Edmonds. Whether you like Benjamin or not, he's a rookie in a weird offseason. So Chase Edmonds is the next guy up. So I think he has true sleeper potential. We've seen glimpses of what he can be. I want to get pieces of this offense. So he is a guy that I'll be targeting late rounds in redraft leagues.
And if something does happen to Drake, let's say Drake gets hurt, whatever, week 4, week 6, week 8, I would not be shocked if the majority of fantasy playoff teams and championship teams had Edmonds on their roster. That guy can be a league winner.
Yeah, it's probably the same amount of teams that had Kenyon Drake on their roster last year when he was probably lightly owned and then got traded to Arizona and had a renaissance. As I said, the last 5 weeks of the NFL season, he was running back 3. So you see what the potential is in that Cardinals offense. All right, so breakout bust sleeper out of the way. What is your prediction for these Arizona Cardinals?
I'm going negativity as my calling card here. Last season, a lot of people really liked Andy Isabella as a prospect, little undersized but speedy guy. He ended up with 9 catches, 189 yards, and 1 touchdown. This year, I think he finishes with less. I think he ends up going under 9, 189-1. They added Hopkins. Keyshawn Johnson built some decent rapport last year on that team. Early reports where Johnson and Murray were really linking up together a lot, and then he looked okay in the few splashes he had throughout the year. Hakeem Butler got hurt early, and they had a lot of positive things to say about him early in the year also. So Butler's going to have another year on the team. They brought in Hopkins, as I mentioned. Fitz is still there. Kirk is still there, who's the clear number 3. I don't see where Andy Isabella has room to grow at all. So enjoy that 9, 189-1. Hit the bricks, sir.
Oh, Andy Isabella enthusiasts. The air is being let out of their balloon. I have Isabella in a few spots, only because I picked him up after people that drafted him dropped him after a disappointing first season. So I have minimal investment in the guy. I still am interested to see what he can be, but I'm with you. I mean, you're talking fourth receiving option at best, and there's not going to be volume. I sure hope he has more than 9 catches, but 20 yards per reception. Maybe he won't do that. I think it was largely on an 80-yard touchdown that he randomly caught the 1 week. So hurts to hear, but I don't disagree with you. I'm going to go with Kenyon Drake, and I'm going to say that Kenyon Drake will not be an RB1 in 2020.
I like it.
I said with Arizona, his 6.5% rushing TD rate was greater than his 6.1 yards per reception that he had there. Those numbers just don't seem correct to me, and he's going to come back down to earth. 8 touchdowns on his limited carries during his time there. He's a much better receiver than that 6.1 would indicate, but still is true. And while that's just not a true indication of how good someone is at doing it, it's just a reality that he seemed to be much better as a pass catcher before his time in Arizona. And maybe it's Kyler Murray and his inability to scramble. He doesn't look to check down as much. You hear that a lot with mobile quarterbacks. So if I can't rely on him to continue to contribute as a receiver, I know his rushing TD rate is going to come down. I also know that he has not been a bell cow at any point in his career. His most touches last year was the 220 that he had between Miami and Arizona. So it takes volume to be an RB1 across the season. And I just don't think he's going to get that volume. And I think there's a chance he could get hurt if he gets that volume. So enter in the Chase Edmonds sleeper and the Kenyon Drake prediction.
Tie a whole little bow on that Cardinals.
Yes.
So
still excited about him. I'm not going to lie. I want the running back for the Cardinals. And I clearly think Kyler Murray is going to light the world up. So you want some of those pass catchers. It's just, don't know who that running back will ultimately be, and anyone that says they think they do with any certainty is just lying through their teeth. So.
That is true. Moving on to the Los Angeles Rams. Rams, same thing, brought in nothing offensively via free agency. In the draft, though, brought in a couple of names people are familiar with and excited about, or not, depending on who you're talking to. But Cam Akers, running back out of Florida State, in the 2nd round. Also in the 2nd round, wide receiver, personal favorite of mine, Van Jefferson from Florida. And then the 4th, tight end Bryson Hopkins, who I liked pre-draft but don't love this landing spot. But that was their off-season.
Twas. Yeah, and might as well just get right in there with my breakout, and it's going to be Cam Akers. Todd Gurley is no longer a Ram. They let him walk and paid him a ton of money, or didn't pay him a ton of money, I guess, yet. All things being considered, on his way out the door. Gurley is on a 1-year deal back with the Atlanta Falcons, or back in Georgia, I should say, with the Atlanta Falcons, not back with the Atlanta Falcons. So it just opens up a lot of opportunity for the Rams rushing offense. And while I don't think Darrell Henderson is dead, I was thoroughly unimpressed with his rookie year production and inability to get involved. Malcolm Brown lingering around as a touchdown vulture is slightly concerning, but they traded up to get Akers. They committed draft capital to this kid. The running back is an important aspect of this offense, and Cam Akers is a grown man. This dude thrived in shit, at Florida State, and you have to think that Sean McVay's offense is going to be an upgrade for Mr. Akers. So it has breakout written all over him, and I would not be the slightest bit surprised if he was the top rookie running back from a fantasy perspective this year.
I like it. I'll discuss Akers a little more later, but I had to stick to brand. My breakout, I went with Van Jefferson. I was a huge fan going into it. Another Senior Bowl guy. I think he was clocked fastest or second fastest guy in game speed for the Senior Bowl and practices and stuff. I'm just a big fan of any of these guys that come out and they're strong route runners. Yeah, he's a little older, but and especially in a year like this, for rookies in particular, if he can be on the field and it's where Goff and the offense expects him to be, he's going to see some production. Obviously, he's going to be the number 3 in this offense, and I like him more long-term for Dynasty too, because the contract situations of Woods and Kupp and Reynolds, Jefferson could be their number 1 because they're in kind of salary cap hell if you go down the road a few years looking at contracts. But currently ADP, wide receiver 76, 183rd overall. Not huge numbers. The team has 121 vacated targets. I think he could get 60 targets, 40 catches, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns, puts him at wide receiver 48, which almost doubles up his ADP. I don't expect a ton this year, but I think he'll be productive in spots. He's a fine bye-week fill-in, and like I said, I think that 4,402 is kind of his floor. And same thing, just based on that ADP, give me as much of him as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he has the potential to break out this year because Josh Reynolds isn't going anywhere in their 3 wide sets. He's actually been quite productive when given the opportunity. And they also ran a ton of 12 personnel down the stretch once they got Gerald Everett back. So it might be signifying a shift, in philosophy. The person that hurts could potentially be Cooper Kupp more than anyone else, as he's not going to be on the field as much. His snap counts went down tremendously when they went to this 12 personnel, although he still did score a touchdown, I believe, in like his last 6 games. But that's a little fluky in his, when the volume goes down, opportunity equals fantasy points at the end of the day. So I'm a little concerned about Cooper Kupp as well. Just think a year or two from your boy Van Jefferson before we can be calling for the breakout. But move on from these rookies and let's talk about busts. And there's just one guy that's squarely in the crosshairs of Bustville, in my opinion, for these Los Angeles Rams. And it is Tyler Higbee. People want to act like Tyler Higbee just finally broke out. These last 5 games of 2019, he was great. And anyone that had him should be grateful for what he did during their playoff run in 2019. Anyone that thinks that is going to persist in 2020 is sadly mistaken, in my opinion. His pace off of those games would have yielded 179 targets for 138 receptions for 1,670 yards and 6 touchdowns.
That's ridiculous.
That's what the pace was, okay? They were just adjusting on the fly, and he was a product of volume for that short period of time. Hopefully you sold off of that, because prior to those 5 games, so every game of his NFL career prior to those 5 games, this is what Tyler Higbee averaged for his career. 2.4 targets for 1.4 receptions, 15.2 yards, and 0.1 touchdowns. That is a pace of 38 targets, 23 catches, a whopping 243 yards, and 1 touchdown per season. There's no way that guy turned into this guy overnight and is going to sustain it. I'm sorry. It was situational, and he is going to just disappoint fantasy owners that think they're going back to the well with a tight end 1 again this year.
Hurts my feeling, but I agree. I've been a Higbee guy since he came out of Western Kentucky. I think I wrote something up on him as a pre-draft guy back in the day for DFF. So I like him. I think the talent's there, but I agree with you completely. It was tons of volume towards the end of the year. Being drafted as tight end 10, I mean, if you've listened to this whole series, how many of our breakouts and sleepers have been tight ends? There's a lot of guys that are going to go behind him in drafts that are going to outproduce him, and especially if you don't mind streaming at the position, you're going to get somebody who's better than Higbee. Gerald Everett isn't going anywhere. He hasn't been as productive on the field for fantasy purposes as Higbee has been in the short while they've been there, but Everett's still pretty good, and I mentioned earlier they brought in Bryson Hopkins, who's going to be a decent NFL tight end too. So I just like you said, I do like Higbee, but Tight end 10? I'm going to pass. I agree. He's my bust. Yeah. Moving on to sleeper, though. Somebody you kind of mentioned their name earlier, and I'm kind of excited after I started looking into this, and I may be looking to acquire him in a few leagues now, if he's not on waivers. Malcolm Brown. You had mentioned Henderson. People got all excited for him last year, thinking the demise of Gurley was in place, and then they got rid of Gurley, and everyone was all high on Henderson again, and then they got Cam Akers and down on Henderson. Henderson is still being drafted as RB50 right now, with Akers at RB18. Malcolm Brown is RB86, and I don't see the gap between Brown and Henderson being 36 players at the position. Last year, Henderson got 39 carries. Malcolm Brown had 69 with 5 scores. Brown has a role on this team. They like him. Do I think he's an NFL starter? No, but he sure is one hell of a capable backup. And when they do plug him in there, he's been effective. And if something were to happen to Akers or he doesn't catch on to the playbook right away with this wacky offseason, I think Brown's the recipient, no matter how much the team is talking up Henderson. 261 overall for someone who, like I said, finished RB67, which is not special, and especially in a year like this where guys are going to be on IR for 3 weeks sometimes or whatever weird special IR rules they have this year. I think Brown's going to get a lot more work than people are thinking, and I think he's going to get a lot more work than Henderson for sure. So Brown is my sleeper, and I'm pretty happy with that one.
Yeah, he's definitely going to have a role, and might even be the short yardage role, which there's money to be made in touchdown production. I mean, I think it was Gurley had 52 touchdowns in the last 3 seasons as a Ram. So you want to try and get a little bit of that, and Malcolm Brown is pretty much free. So before I go to my sleeper, I want to circle back and take one more shot at Tyler Higbee as I'm just peeling back the onion a little more. And I went to look at the tight end snap counts, and looks like Everett was hurt in week 12, just on a snap count basis. So going into week 12, Tyler Higbee had not hit the 50 snap threshold in any single week going into week 12, while Gerald Everett had 5 50 snap count games going into week 12. Week 13 is when Everett got hurt and the Tyler Higbee explosion happened. Tyler Higbee snap counts those games: 72, 66, 63, 62, 79 those last 5 weeks. It ain't happening again. This dude is not averaging 70 snaps per game in 2020. It's just he was the option in this modified offense. But to seamless transition to the sleeper, Gerald Everett. I love Gerald Everett. South Alabama product. You were referencing knowing Tyler Higbee since he came out, Western Michigan. I was all over Gerald Everett. He was the first draft pick in the Sean McVay era. Compared him to Jordan Reed. I was so excited. I was giddy, trying to hold in my excitement for what this kid could be. Just uber athletic, but hasn't translated yet, and then got hurt at probably a key time. I'm curious as to what would have happened if Everett was healthy during this 12 personnel stretch at the end of the year. It might have been Gerald Everett we're talking about instead of Tyler Higbee. So I'm a bigger fan of Everett as a tight end than I am of Higbee, and you can get him worlds cheaper if that's what you're looking into. And if you want a piece of a tight end in LA, draft another tight end earlier. Go get you a Jonnu Smith or one of these mid-tier guys that we still believe in as well, and then draft Gerald Everett at the end of the draft and see what comes of it. I think Gerald Everett's going to be out of the Los Angeles next year. He's in the last year of his deal. You said they did draft Bryson Hopkins. I think he is unfortunately a Gerald Everett replacement because, to your point, they are in dire straits because of Les Snead and his inability to manage a cap and just throw money at throw bad contracts at players. I mean, the Todd Gurley contract was just a jumping off point. Then he went and severely overpaid Jared Goff, which Jared Goff supporters will probably say he's a deal now. In my opinion, he's still not. Jared Goff isn't a special quarterback, in my humble opinion. They're not going to be able to pay Cooper Kupp because of it, because they're going to have to shell out a shit ton to Jalen Ramsey unless they have already, which I don't believe they did. They got to keep the D tackle happy. Aaron Donald, 99. They have star power there, and you got to pay star power. So it's going to come to roost. And ultimately, I think players like Gerald Everett and even Cooper Kupp are going to be casualties, is the appropriate word, for these Los Angeles Rams. So
I'm looking at the Gerald Everett trades on DLF's Trade Finder, and he's not as cheap as I would have thought. Most of these trades, he's going for a third. Somebody packaged Everett and a first for DK Metcalf. Adam Humphrey, straight up for Gerald Everett, which I would take every day. Here's one for you. Gerald Everett or Rashad Penny?
Gerald Everett. I mean, unfortunately, where the injury happened to Penny, he's causing concern, and we'll talk about those Seahawks in a minute for what he's going to do.
It's like a third is a going rate, and I would have thought you could get him for a fourth or a fifth, to be honest. He seems to be off the radar, but not quite.
Yeah, I mean, there's still enough hype on Twitter. You still catch a little glimpse of Gerald Everett here and there from some of the truthers that won't let his fire extinguish completely. So I think a third is fair for Everett. A late third is probably not too much to ask. Again, look back at your last 3 drafts and who did you take in the third round of your draft, and then ask yourself, is that guy really a difference maker on your team? As good as we all think we are in this, more 50%, probably the best we could assume from a third round pick. Fourth and fifth, less than that. You hit your first and second, third and fifth at dart throw largely. Unless you have 12 of them, then you can tell me how good your stats are with third round picks. But I'd probably give a third up for Gerald Everett if I was in need of a tight end, or certainly in a tight end premium.
So who or what is your prediction for the Rams?
Well, you did talk about Van Jefferson in the breakout, but there was a notable omission of any pass catchers by and large here, and they have some names. So I'm going to talk about Robert Woods, and I have not been the biggest Robert Woods fan. I think he's a good receiver. I don't think he's a great receiver. But I think opportunity is going to strike Mr. Woods in 2020. And I said that Robert Woods will post his best fantasy finish to date. And for those of you that don't know,
wide receiver 1.
Bobby Woods was the wide receiver 10 overall in 2018. I think they're going to throw it a lot. They keep to their 12 personnel. It's going to mean less Cup, and it's going to be more Woods and maybe your boy Van Jefferson, but most likely it's going to be Reynolds on the outside. And he just has a rapport established with Jared Goff. So touchdowns are fluky. Woods had 2 last year off of that volume. I think he can sneak and be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver this year.
So Akers was your breakout. I went Van Jefferson just because I had to get an excuse to talk about my guy again. Akers is not wrong either. I have Cam Akers, 277 carries, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns, 30 receptions, 240 through the air, 2 more scores for 236 PPR fantasy points, putting him as a low-end RB1. And I agree with you entirely. I am anticipating him actually being the highest scoring rookie running back this year.
Whew. You never cease to amaze me with these bold predictions, John. But, I mean, as far as they're all concerned, I mean, he has the least amount in his way for significant touches, regardless of what you think about any of these other running backs. I mean, Marlon Mack is more of an impediment to Jonathan Taylor, even though I don't think he is an impediment to Jonathan Taylor, but he's just not going away. Damian Williams should have been the Super Bowl MVP, was a catalyst in their entire playoff run. In spurts, he is a viable and valuable option, and they're not just putting him to the side. I do think Edwards-Helaire has more touches, but Damian Williams isn't totally disappearing. And then Mark Ingram, while I think J.K. Dobbins probably does everything better than Ingram, from day one as a Raven, Ingram's like the heart and soul of that team, and they're still tied to him for 1 more year of his contract, and he's probably going to see 200 touches. So the rest just don't have that 250-plus touch upside that I think is almost assumed with Cam Akers at this point in time. So I don't know that it's a stretch at all. I mean, to 10 rushing touchdowns. You tied yourself to that Todd Gurley stat a little earlier that they score rushing touchdowns in this offense. So I'd love to see it. I love Cam Akers, and unfortunately, I own him exactly 0 places. So it hurts to hear it. 2 shares, I'd kill for 2 shares of him right now. But nice way to button up the Rams, and let's move forward and talk about the extremely topical Seattle Seahawks. Your Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, the free agency, they didn't do much. There were some rumors of Antonio Brown possibly going there, some videos of him working out Russell Wilson. They are saying they'll be interested in bringing back Josh Gordon if he's healthy, so they're covering the bases on the shithead wide receivers. But, yeah, the topical news, as a Seahawks fan, very seldomly does one of your favorite players end up on your favorite team, and boy, do I love me some Jamal Adams. And time to buy a jersey. That's all I'm saying. So, yeah, him coming to Seattle is pretty exciting. But Adams is one of my favorites. That was the big thing. Nothing offensively for them in free agency. In the draft, 4th round, Colby Parkinson, tight end. Also 4th round, DJ Dallas, running back. Then someone named Freddie Swain in the 6th, who I did not know till I started crunching these numbers. He's a wide receiver. And kind of surprised people in the 7th, took a second tight end, Stephen Sullivan from LSU, while Thaddeus Moss went undrafted. So he was totally off the radar. But they got a couple tight ends, running back, wide receiver there, and that kind of wrapped up their offseason. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Pete Carroll made a call to LSU and asked about Stephen Sullivan, and he was told so many glowing things about his athleticism that, of course, they had to get that guy on their team. But one, I'm just very excited to hear you mention John Ursua at some point in this breakout bust sleeper prediction segment, because to your point, they dipped their toe in the Antonio Brown thing. We saw that he was catching passes from Russell Wilson in some immaculately manscaped football field in a part of the country that none of us will ever set foot on. And then who knows what's going to happen with Josh Gordon. He's applying for reinstatement for, the 12th time at this point in time. They're looking for bodies behind Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So we'll see how that goes. But, yeah, the Jamal Adams thing's interesting enough. He just clearly did not want anything to do with Adam Gase. I think at the end of the day, that's what it came down to. It was Adam Gase. He also said that Joe Douglas lied to him, which could or could not be true. But he just saw a failed experiment. And one more year of Gase and then a rebuild. He wanted nothing to do with it. I can't blame him. I mean, he does talk one game.
But how many times do we have to see this story with Gase before people just start realizing where the finger needs to be pointed? Like, it's been literally nonstop.
Well, the irony is, and I don't know if you've seen it, but someone interviewed Frank Gore, and Frank Gore said that Gase is like one of the most like stand-up guys that he knows, like transparent, tells you where you stand. When he brought him in, he said, "This is Bell's team. We need you to come in here and help out," type thing. Like, you're not vying for the starting running back position. Like, Frank Gore said Gase was a reason that he went to the Jets. Probably the same reason he went to Miami, because he was all the way back. Like, Gase was like a nobody assistant with the 49ers, I come to find out, when Frank Gore was in San Fran. So, like, Gore's known Gase for probably 10, 12 years at this point, or 100 years, however long he's been in the NFL. But he vouched for the guy. So it's interesting to see. Maybe he just doesn't like outspoken malcontents at the end of the day. He likes the guys that come in with their lunchbox and just do their job. So good for Jamal Adams. It'll be exciting to see him with the Seahawks. You know, you just like that safety position. They're already showing videos of Cam Chancellor. Now, I love Jamal Adams as well. I have him in a couple IDP spots. This isn't a ding to his value as far as IDP is concerned, but I just hate when people bitch their way out of situations, and then come to find out that he already said he'll play under the $3 million deal that he already had assigned, and that there's no guarantees. He might actually have to play the 5th-year option as well. Like, Seattle didn't make him any guarantees, like, bring you here, we're going to give you a new contract. They flat out said, no, you're going to have to honor your existing contract. That's just how bad he wanted out of New York. We all thought it was about the money and the new deal. No, he just didn't want to play for Adam Gase. At the end of the day, that's all he wanted. I'll honor my contract. I just don't want to do it in New York.
The first won't be the last.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive into these, IDP guys, fantasy relevant players at this point in time. So I'm going right out. Breakout DK Metcalf. I am all bought in on DK Metcalf. These videos, him just like alien jumping over everything. Just like the guy knows no limits. He's not bound by the fundamentals of gravity. He's inhumanly big and strong. I'm of the mindset that DK Metcalf is truly not a human being. I don't know what he is, but he was created in a lab somewhere to take over the NFL. And that's what he's going to do. He's already the wide receiver 1 in Seattle. Sorry, Tyler Lockett. You're just not meant to be an alpha. You're a perfect complement receiver, and you're by all means like the nicest guy in the NFL. You can never say anything bad about anyone, God-fearing. Tyler Lockett, tremendous human being. But you missed your window. You're not the wide receiver 1. It's DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is going to absolutely explode on the NFL this year. Double-digit touchdowns are guaranteed for DK Metcalf in 2020.
I also went with Metcalf. Not as big a fan as you, not as much of a global endorsement you're going to get here, but last year he was wide receiver 30, which I probably exceeded what people were expecting. Well, fair enough. Not a lot of people. Yeah, a lot of people. He was the greatest prospect in history. This year he's being drafted wide receiver 15, which I think is a hair high. Overall 37th. Look, they have a narrow distribution tree. It's Lockett, it's Metcalf, whoever their starting tight end is and a smattering of passes to the running back. There's only so much room for people to break out here. It has to be Metcalf. I mean, wide receiver 30 is a mid-level wide receiver 3. Could he easily be move up a whole tier to mid-pack wide receiver 2? Yes. And you had mentioned the touchdowns. If he gets in there, double-digit or close to it, he could possibly flirt with low-end wide receivers if he gets kind of the volume people are anticipating in year 2. So I'm with you with Metcalf.
Before we move on, I just want to do a comparison because when I wanted to look him up as far as where he finished last year, another name stuck out to me. And DK Metcalf was wide receiver 30 last year. You know who wide receiver 29 was?
I think I do because I looked at the same stuff, but I don't have it in front of me.
Your boyfriend. Who's your boyfriend?
McLaurin?
Terry McLaurin. Everyone is sucking Terry McLaurin off. It was a 2-game difference, but listen to these stat comparisons. Metcalf had 100 targets, 58 catches, 900 yards, 7 touchdowns. Terry McLaurin, 93 targets, 58 catches, 919 yards, 7 touchdowns. Why is Terry McLaurin the greatest thing that's ever happened in the entire NFL? And unless DK Metcalf is literally jumping sideways over hurdles, he still really isn't being talked about. You know,
I think it's what he did. Expectations and cost, I think.
Yeah.
People expected Metcalf to be amazing out of the gate. So finishing where he did, it felt more like a letdown where lots of people were not in on McLaurin. So for him to do good, you know what I mean? People like getting that sleeper under the radar guy feeling right about something. Metcalf was already, being drafted at his ceiling as in rookie drafts.
Yeah. Metcalf had more catches last year than A.J. Brown. So just everyone and A.J. Brown had one more touchdown. It's just he had a couple more explosive plays. It's just you just still don't hear anything about DK Metcalf at the end of the day. Like the dude's going to be a wide receiver 1 sooner or later.
Don't you think it's because people already have like a thing in their head with him though? Like I don't think it's disrespectful. It's like no one's talking about Russell Wilson or
thoroughly disrespectful. Put some respect on his name.
Speaking of disrespect, let's talk about busts. Who's your bust for the Seahawks?
My bust is Chris Carson. 21 touches per game in 2019 and injured yet again to finish the season. And I said Carlos Hyde has more than injury insurance in 2020, and I'm all but going to guarantee 100-plus touches for Mr. Hyde. So that makes Chris Carson Dr. Jekyll at the end of the day. And anyone who wants to continue just to think he's just going to get force-fed carries over and 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 over again when he keeps getting injured every time that happens, be my guest. I'm not there on Chris Carson. I'm not going to trust a hip injury that he let heal on his own. Didn't have surgery to fix it. He just thinks like rest and rehab. Yeah, that usually works out pretty well for these guys by not getting the surgery and just thinking their body is going to Wolverine itself. Not everyone's DK Metcalf, people. Like they don't have the ability just to heal and regenerate. Chris Carson, unfortunately, the way he plays is going to lend itself to injury more often than not, and I do not want a running back with a hip injury. So
this isn't a huge bust. It's not a shocker. I've never been a big Will Dissly guy. He had a couple big games, some spectacular catches, and people just started drooling all over Will Dissly. When they drafted him, he's a good real-life tight end. He's a good blocker. He's not supposed to be a fantasy option. He's being drafted as a tight end 31, which is about accurate. But they brought in Greg Olsen, who I don't think I mentioned earlier. I totally skipped that. They drafted – I mentioned, though, they did take 2 in the draft. So they got Colby Parkinson. They brought in Steven Sullivan. If they loved Will Dissly as much as some people in the fantasy community, they wouldn't have brought in 3 tight ends this offseason. So I've been off the Dissly thing. If you still have him and somebody wants him in your league, I would take a 5th for him at this point. Just get out of the Will Dissly business. I'm just never been a fan. I like him as a pro, not for fantasy.
Yeah, Will Dissly 4 touchdowns in 6 games before he – what did he do? Is it Achilles? Like it was an ACL, then an Achilles. That dude just –
was it that or his patellar tendon?
Whatever it was, just catastrophic injuries to this gentleman year after year. And then, to your point, they go and they bring in Greg Olsen. So you might as well just shelf Dissly for the 2020 season because Olsen isn't leaving the field in favor of Will Dissly. So your long-term investment in Will Dissly is then going to start in 2021. I agree with you. It's unfortunate because it was a good story, but yeah, he was never supposed to happen. So no argument with your bust. My sleeper, you mentioned him earlier because he's a rookie and there's not much sleeping on this team, is DJ Dallas. I said that Chris Carson is not meant to be this bell cow back. He's just injury-ish prone. Hyde is super limited. I mean, it took Bill O'Brien to prop him up for one more season and force feed 200 carries. I don't think they would do that in Seattle if Chris Carson went down. Consider me a Travis Homer non-believer. I think he was okay in spot starts, but they went and put fourth-round capital on DJ Dallas, who shared the backfield with Travis Homer 1 year ago in Miami. You mentioned Rashad Penny earlier. I think he starts on the IR, so best case he's a back nine player for this season. And they said it was a significant ACL with him. It was like more than just the ACL. So Rashad Penny might not play football in 2020 when it's all said and done. So give me a Seattle running back that's pretty much free in any redraft, and it's DJ Dallas. I liked him even before Seattle drafted him, and where he landed only really helped my outlooks of DJ Dallas. Yeah. He's probably an injury away guy from meaningful snaps.
Preach. I've got nothing to do but shake my head in agreement. My sleeper, and it's kind of a cheaty sleeper. It's not like somebody you've never heard of. I think people are sleeping on Tyler Lockett. I think the Metcalf love is a little too much. Like I said, wide receiver 15 earlier. Lockett's wide receiver 28. 2 years ago, he was the 11th overall fantasy wide receiver. Last year, he was wide receiver 15. Again, it's a narrow distribution tree. Lockett and Metcalf are the passing game, unless they bring in somebody else that we don't know of just yet, like Antonio Brown. Lockett's still going to get the same volume he's gotten the last couple of years. And with that volume, he's produced low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 numbers. There's no reason to suspect he won't sustain that. And if you are in a league that gets kick and punt return points, he was the wide receiver 3 last year. So he's on the field. He gets the special team points if you're in a league that rewards that. So for me, people just seem to forget all about Tyler Lockett because he's not the flashiest guy in the league, but he is productive, and he's been productive for this will be 3 years now. He's Russell Wilson trusts him and likes him on the field, and there's no real competition for targets that is coming from anywhere else. That he's going to be a top 3 option every single week in the passing game for this team.
Yeah, I can't argue with you. You think he maintains that special teams production again this year?
Yep.
Asking for someone drafting with Giants relatively soon, where Tyler Lockett's probably like the best wide receiver to have in that format.
Yeah, I mean, they've said it the last couple of years. If you read the offseason stuff, they'll draft somebody, and they're like, oh, maybe about time Tyler Lockett gives up a little of this. Whether he gets removed from punt or kick and somebody comes in to just take over one of those jobs, I don't see him losing both of those jobs, no.
Yeah, I'm with you. No, qualifies as a sleeper. But as we've kind of gone through these teams, you just realize how hard this really is to find someone with any conviction to put in a lot of these spots. You know, they're pretty realized as well, those Seahawks. And like you said, narrow pass rate. There's 2 wide receivers, and there's going to be Greg Olsen at tight end, and that's who's going to see probably 75% of the targets in this offense. So who's really going to sleep? But yeah, obviously Tyler Lockett has upside. He came out of the gate on fire last year, and then I think he got hurt and then disappeared down the stretch, and that's when DK Metcalf started happening. Tyler Lockett was setting up to have an all-time season through a few weeks. But
and if Metcalf takes the step forward, like a lot of people are expecting, teams are going to put a little more coverage to his side of the field, which is going to free up Lockett.
Yeah. All right, so we might as well just play off of that 2 awesome wide receiver narrative and go into my prediction and say that Russell Wilson finally gets to cook. I'm buying into this let Russ cook shit, even though it's like the corniest thing ever said in the history of mankind, but we're going to let Russ cook. And that's going to produce 5,000 combined yards.
Oh.
He's never going to throw for 5,000. They just won't let it happen. 5,000 combined yards is silly shit ton because Russ is running less and less. And 35 total touchdowns this season. Give me that Russ production. I think he can threaten 4,500 passing yards, which would be a career high for him. We all know he can put 500 rushing yards, on the ledger any given season. I don't think he's past that prime of wanting to win games for him and bring a little rushing production week in and week out. And then 35 touchdowns, I don't even think is a high watermark for him either. I think a 40 touchdown would be like a bold type prediction. I think Russell Wilson has 5,000 yards and 35 touchdowns in him this year.
I love it. And I need it in a couple spots, so I hope you're right. My prediction, not as big as some of my earlier ones. You actually said it during your sleeper thing. I think DJ Dallas finishes the year with the most fantasy points among Seattle running backs. Coming in as a rookie, and I know we beat the shit out of this narrative when we get a chance, pass pro doesn't matter. He's arguably the best pass protecting running back in this draft. He whiffs quite a bit, but he kind of gets his assignments. I've never seen him completely get destroyed. So he has an opportunity to get in there. Like you said, Penny's probably going to start the year on PUP, if not injured reserve. He's going to get an opportunity in these first, if he is on PUP, 4 to 6 weeks, whatever it is, till Penny's even eligible to come back. And I think his pass pro is going to allow him to at least get on the field a lot earlier than other rookie running backs who didn't get to participate in the offseason. And you had mentioned earlier, Carson gets banged up. Hyde is Carlos Hyde. We know what he is. Homer's no threat to anybody. And this team doesn't give a shit about draft capital or who's who on their roster. If you can prove you can play, you'll get out there. And I think Dallas can. And I fingers crossed, hope so, because I got a ton of them.
Listen, wait until the Seahawks end up signing Bo Scarborough off of the Detroit Lions practice squad, and he's an absolute monster for him down the stretch. But I'm right there with you. I like DJ Dallas. So, last but not least, the Super Bowl losing San Francisco 49ers. Tell me about them.
Another team who did nothing in free agency for offense, but in the draft took Brandon Ayuk in the first round, wide receiver. Some guy named Charlie Warner, tight end in the 6th. People liked kind of early in the draft process, kind of fell off the radar. Jawan Jennings, 7th round wide receiver. Not a ton of action on the offensive side for the Niners, but they had a lot of pieces in place already. What did you think of their offseason, and who's your breakout?
Oh, well synopsed. I don't even think that's a word, but I liked it, so I'm running with it. And before we go, I don't know why I was dabbling on Twitter while you were talking and came across the top 20 tight ends according to ECR by Fantasy Pros. And Tyler Higbee is tight end 7 in ECR right now. So
you can
don't know what to do with that piece of information. My breakout would have been Deebo Samuel. I love Deebo Samuel, and he would have been like literally the perfect breakout candidate of every team we discussed. This is team 32. He would have been the number one breakout candidate, in my opinion. Qualify under every metric, and then he has to go and get the dreaded Jones fracture. And yeah, he can say he's going to come back by week 1 all he wants. That's an injury that I think more often than not needs a second surgery. Just because of where it is. I think it's on the outside of the little toe. So like cutting and breaking and stuff just puts so much stress on that bone that it typically recurs. So that's unfortunate. We love us some Deebo Samuel here. And that dude was poised rocket ship in 2020. But without him, I have to go with Brandon Ayuk.
Me too.
I said, who else are they going to throw to? Kendrick Bourne? Yeah, that was meant for you. That I also do right. I do like Jalen Hurd as well, but that dude missed his whole rookie season with an injury. I think it was like a back injury, so that's concerning. But he's another guy I would throw a late flyer on with Jalen Hurd because I think they're going to move him around. He's going to get running back carries. He's going to play move tight end for them. He'll be split out wide. Like super interested to see what they do with Jalen Hurd. But Brandon Ayuk should be their top wide receiver right off the bus in 2020. So I'm going to go with Brandon Ayuk. He might actually return the best stat line from any rookie wide receiver in 2020. Or Wookie. I mean, I'm pretty sure he'll be the best Wookie wide receiver as well. Those dudes are short and fat.
You took all the words out of my mouth. Debo's banged up already. Manny Sanders was there last year. He is gone. Who's left? It's got to be him. And he's really quite a steal. I'm surprised that ADP hasn't changed much. Wide receiver 47 overall and 98th overall. He could be a wide receiver 2. Could he tinker with wide receiver 12 if Debo takes a long time to get back? He might, just because you said it. There's not a lot else here, so there's no all arrows point to Ayuk. I don't see how it's not him.
And listen, for those in the back that didn't hear it, Kyle Shanahan said that they had Brandon Ayuk right on par with CeeDee Lamb as the top wide receiver in this class.
I don't
you don't make that up, and there's no reason you say it after you pick them if you actually didn't mean it. Like, there's no value to be had.
Yeah, I listen to NFL Network a lot when I'm driving, and they're a couple of the shows I listen to. They got some inside information, and they said several teams had Ayuk as the wide receiver 1 in this class. which this was a stacked wide receiver class, so that's not.
Yeah. Listen, I wasn't the biggest fan. JUCO transfer, Arizona State after sitting behind N'Keal Harry until this last season. But Ayuk has probably the longest arms on an average-sized human being I've ever seen in my life. He's a fucking pterodactyl. So you can do stuff with that. And his after the catch, his special teams ability, I should have liked him. He checks a lot of my boxes at the end of the day, but I just didn't get there. But once Shanny put the stamp of approval on him, said, I got to get him a couple places. Hey, another guy, Joe Williams. Where you at, Joe? All right, so we're both breaking out Brandon Ayuk. So who we busting?
I am going to bust Raheem Mostert. And this was before he was even saying, he wanted a contract, now he wants out. I don't know what he's got going on with all that shit. But currently running back 32, which I was surprised was low, because if you look on Twitter, people think he's going to be an amazing player this year. Shanahan uses the back by committee thing. Mostert was great in the fantasy world, especially in the playoffs. Won me some money in a few spots. But there's a reason he's a journeyman. It's a product of the system. Just behind Mostert in ADP, listen to these names: Mark Ingram, Zach Moss, Tariq Cohen, Matt Breida, Jordan Howard, Antonio Gibson, James White, Tony Pollard
on those Miami guys.
Lindsey. I'll take all of those guys before I'm taking Mostert. So to me, I don't see how he repeats on that. If he is even there, could he have a few big weeks? Sure, but no thank you. I'll take the consistency and abilities of all the guys. The next, 9 guys going behind him? Yeah,
I had no real argument on most of them. And listen, for the sake of consistency, I also went with Raheem Mostert. But since I did homework, I have to read what I said, because when I put time in, and get paid for my time. So I wrote Raheem Mostert, whose actual name is Dominique Raheem Mostert, for a Pro Football Reference. Let's bring that in. So it's Dominique Mostert. He's a 28-year-old journeyman running back asking for a new contract from the head coach who practically invented running backs don't matter. Good luck with that. I know he only wants $1 million, and God bless him. Like, the dude, 28 years old. Like, he stayed, he scratched and clawed. Was a special teams guy everywhere. I mean, he was an Eagle at one point in time. So I want him to get the most money he can. If anyone deserves it, it's Raheem Mostert. But why would they pay him? Raheem Mostert is the reason you don't pay Raheem Mostert. You see what they were able to do with him? It's the exact reason you don't pay Raheem Mostert. They actually gave him a good deal for what he was at the time. He was like a special teams demon that had 30 carries the year before. So they rewarded him for such. $1 million might not end his career with the 49ers. I think at the end of the day, they'll probably just do incentive bonuses where he can recoup up to $1 million, because Tevin Coleman shouldn't make more money than any running back in the NFL, in my humble opinion. But it's just Raheem Mostert isn't. He's just It's unfortunate. I just want to keep changing my mind and speaking good about him, but he's the definition of a bust. I got out from under him. I traded him for a late first-round pick.
Holy shit.
Dynasty. Yeah. Yeah, and then that pick ended up being Jalen Reagor. So I traded Raheem Mostert for Jalen Reagor at the end of the day. And I felt dirty. I felt really dirty at the end of the day. But, hey, you offer, someone accepts. You do this. You draft Jalen Reagor, and you go about winning championships, my friend. That's what you do. So, unfortunately, Raheem Mostert. So, natural progression. If Raheem Mostert is a bust and Tevin Coleman isn't good at football, the sleeper has to be.
Oh, no.
My boy. Jerick McKinnon, rightfully left for dead by the fantasy community after 2 lost seasons. McKinnon is staring at the likes of Raheem, Dominique Mostert, and Tevin Coleman for significant touches in my Christ, I can't stop myself, in a Kyle Shanahan offense in 2020. And just for those that don't remember, Jerick McKinnon had a 51-catch season on his resume. Raheem Dominique Mostert has 20 catches for his entire NFL career. That is something that Shanahan wants from his backs that Mostert doesn't offer, which is why he was limited to a running downs only type guy. Oh, if McKinnon can stay healthy. Oh, I know it's like the cliche-est of terms of all fantasy Twitter right now, but if McKinnon can stay healthy, he will be a low-end RB2.
I'm surprised you went that low. I would have anticipated you putting him even higher.
Well, Mostert's not going away, and Coleman's there. So passing down's back with a little rush downs work. He's going to do it almost on the strength of his passing down chops, like a Tariq Cohen type season. But listen, I'm telling you, you're getting a running back 2 in the 13th round redraft, probably later.
Not going to be able to match your energy or love, but I'm going to try with my sleeper. You threw his name out there earlier.
Right in the mud.
My boy, Kendrick Bourne. Da, 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 da. We mentioned Debo's hurt. They vacated targets with Manny Sanders out of the picture. Ayuk has got to be the breakout. I don't necessarily trust Jalen Hurd. He's been a wide receiver for 3 years, and he's missed one of those 3 years. So give me Kendrick Bourne. 2018, 42 catches, 487 in the yardage, and 4 scores. He was number 2 in receptions, number 2 in targets, wide receiver 1 in snaps on the team. He was number 67 in points. Last year, 30 catches, 358, 5 touchdowns, so took a little step back, but he was second on the team in receiving touchdowns, 4th in receptions and targets, number 3 in snaps at the position. Look, he's not going anywhere. By default, he is their wide receiver 2 right now. Technically 3 if you're including Kittle as pass catchers, but he's going as wide receiver 96. And since he's been part of this offense, he hasn't finished even in the 70s. He's been a mid-60s wide receiver, so he is playable. He's had a few games. Garoppolo does look for him, especially in the red zone. He's got decent rapport with him, and he's got opportunity now this year with Debo breaking his foot. So Kendrick Bourne is my sleeper. If you listen to anything I have to say, you probably already have him rostered. But I've been a big fan, and I think he's in a good spot. Do I think he's going to be a wide receiver 2? Possibly not even wide receiver 3? No, but he's going to blow past that ADP, and this is a perfect year for it. So give me my man Kendrick Bourne as my sleeper.
Yeah, see, I don't hate him as much as I might have alluded to at the beginning. I just knew it was a little bit of a rise out of you. I think there's opportunity. And to that point, you know who got Kendrick Bourne at pick 243 overall in the Scott Fish Bowl?
It'd be you.
This guy. I took Ayuk and I took Bourne. So I'm trying to get that wide receiver 1 in that 49er offense. Debo went a little too early in my draft. Or I probably would have been willing to risk it with him, but I went for their pass catchers because someone has to do it. They can't they're not just going to run the entire year like they did in the playoffs. They're going to be in more negative game scripts, likely, and they're going to have to throw the ball. So why not Kendrick Bourne, who, has a rapport with Garoppolo, has touchdown upside, and is free? Look, the 21st round is when I got Mr. Bourne. So the dude can happen. So I'm right there with you. He definitely qualifies as a sleeper.
I'm going to jump in and do my prediction first because it's not that exciting, and you've already covered everything here. But I think McKinnon is the top fantasy running back for the 49ers this year. I've never been a huge fan, but the opportunity is there. I don't think the competition is. It's a pass-catching back in a Shanahan offense. Everything says McKinnon. So, you mentioned earlier, as long as he's healthy, I don't see why it wouldn't be McKinnon.
Yeah, I know it pains you to say it.
It does.
It probably pains you to put pen to paper and write it down because it's out there in the ether. But I'm with you. He has all the upside. If he gets that passing game role in that offense, wheels up. So you said yours wasn't that awe-inspiring. Mine is probably less so at the end of the day. So to button up these divisional breakdowns with my San Francisco 49ers prediction, it's that George Kittle finally finishes as the tight end 1 overall. Kelsey has held that crown since 2016. Impressive.
Every year, really?
Every year. Total points. He says he hasn't been hurt either. So to your point, he's getting hurt this year. So that should just clear the deck there. And Kittle's missed a game here and there. I think he missed 2 games last year, if I'm not mistaken. In those 2 games, the backup, Ross Dwelly, had like 2 or 3 touchdowns, where if that just went to Kittle, I think he would have been the tight end 1 last year. But he's going to be the top target in this offense. And Kelsey is a top target in probably the best offense, but many more options in Kansas City than rookie Brandon Ayuk, second year, didn't play rookie year Jalen Hurd, unproven largely Kendrick Bourne, Jones fracture, Debo Samuel, plus running backs. That's what George Kittle has to deal with for targets. I think it finally happens this year. He ascends to the top of the tight end Mount Rushmore, and he's going to sit there for a while too when it's all said and done.
Can't argue it. Can't argue at all. Well, that wraps up the NFC West. Anything else you wanted to add about any of these teams?
Nope. I'm just happy that this is done. We keep minimizing our involvement in these breakdowns. We started this as a team by team breakdown. It was utterly painful with guests, and although the guests were great, that herding those cats was damn near impossible, and doing 32 individual recordings sucked. Then we started slimming it. I think this is about the best we can do. Next year we might just do breakout bust by conference Super Bowl champs and move on. But it's nice to look at these teams after the draft and kind of see how things shake out. So it was fun, but I'm happy it's over. So to your point, we're taking a week off, and then hopefully we'll be diving into the 2020 NFL season, start talking redraft, because August is redraft season, and that's 3 days away.
And you mentioned sometimes this can be teeth-pullingly awful, some of these teams or even whole divisions. But we do, I mean, hopefully people that listen enjoy it too. But I feel like we unearth a few gems. I always write down some notes on something I pick up from you guys, and, the things I didn't think of. Like today, I got a big thing circled, trade for Gerald Everett. So there have been other guys that I've picked up. We go through this, I didn't know this guy had this many targets. I didn't know this was this guy's role. This guy's shittier than I thought he was. This guy's better. So I find it to be a pretty helpful thing for my off-season process. So hopefully it helps you and other people out there.
I think at the end of the day, we're better at this than we think we are, and more people should listen.
I completely agree.
What it comes down to.
And on that note, that should do it. So be sure to follow us on Twitter. Check us out on all the places where you can listen, review, rate, whatever, subscribe. Any place the podcasts are available, we are there. We are the Fantasy 40. Myself, John DeBari, my co-host, Mr. Matt Walker, Andrew Burke, wherever he is and whatever he's doing, and we are out of here.
Ow!
Dun, 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 dun. Alphabetical here. What are the 49ers? Are the 49ers an F or a number? And if they're a number, are they first or last?
I'm gonna allow you to make a judgment call on that, and then if you make the wrong one, I will just.
I put them as a number 49 and made them last.
We'll see. Literally, Twitter is just gonna rename itself. The Terry McLaurin puff piece. What the fuck? I don't even have anything funny to say about it. But I think it's Werner.
Exactly. Who? Hooner.
Mike Shanahan. Fuck. Let's try this podcast thing over again. George Kittle finally finishes as the wide receiver 1 overall in 2020. Sorry, man, I am terrible today. I can't get Mike Shanahan off my brain. I can't get positions right. Yeah. All right. I couldn't land the plane on that Terry McLaurin Twitter joke. It's a rough one. I must be sick.